Well, I think we're going to get started. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is a companion event for Saturday's concert inspired by the Ornament of the World by Maria Rosa Menachal. This is a reprise of a concert we presented in October 2009 with the same name. Then as now, we asked the early and new music vocal trio, Voxfire, to curate the program. The instrumentalists are new this time around and have been drawn from the local Arabic language community. The impetus for reprising this concert is unfortunately obvious. In these fractured times, the theme of tolerance seems more timely than ever. I am delighted to introduce two of the founding members of the vocal trio Voxfire, Samela Beasom and Susan Judy. I'm also delighted to introduce our host, Brian Lauritzen, DJ for Classical KUSC. Brian has provided compelling narration for a few of our Mansions and Music concerts that we have presented in partnership with the ever-inventive Celestina Music Society. Thank you, Brian.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks everyone for showing up. I know Zoom is something that fits in with all of our growing pandemic fatigue, but here we are on screens, and it's great to see all of your faces, even if it has to be virtually for now. And just want to say welcome to Susan and Samela of Voxfire. It's been great to get to know you, and welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ryan.
So I do want to dive into the program pretty quickly, but I do also want to hear about the origins of Voxfire. What led you to create this ensemble and have the focus be what it is?
Well, I could say that I always had this idea as a singer. Well, actually, both of us started out as instrumentalists, but we both finally got into singing. And my idea of singing was always kind of like my idea as a cellist, which was a string quartet and having an ensemble like that. And these two people came along, and we were singing with a number of other ensembles, a bit larger ensembles, and the perfect people came along, and so we put this together.
I remember one particular concert. We were singing with the group I Cantori, which no longer exists, unfortunately, but it was a concert of Ordo Virtutum. It was memorized Latin liturgical drama almost, wasn't it? Chant.
Yeah.
And we really realized how much we loved singing together, Susan, myself, and our original member, Kristen, who sadly is no longer with us. But we just thought we've got to do more of this, and started our group and really focused our energies and attention to the medieval and Renaissance and Baroque, right?
And also contemporary.
And contemporary, but yeah, we commissioned a few works from local composers, which was really fun to do.
It's so interesting because I have the privilege of hosting a choral music program on KUSC, and just the popularity of really early music, early vocal music. What is the allure for you in going way back into history? Like, Bach is hundreds of years later than a lot of what you're singing. What is the draw for you?
Well, for me, I think it's first of all, as a singer, we end up doing a lot of early music anyway in for instance, church settings. So, we're introduced to it at an early time. But for me, what really hit me was the Middle Ages as opposed to the Renaissance, because it was more like the contemporary music that I loved so much. The open fourths and the just the harmonies of some of it. And then the other thing was the fact that that so much of it is improvisational. I mean, we don't know exactly how it was performed, so we get to, you know, make our own decisions about how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Curious for you, Samela, as well.
Well, what drew us to the early music, I think, was the intimacy, and well, we do love the settings and performing in churches because of the acoustic. It's just very pleasing, and being able, it's really exciting, the original trio, to be able to meld our voices so well that it was an exciting sound we could get, the three of us, and the fact that they not only matched but complemented and enriched times. It could also, but then we would sing 3-part harmony as well, and it was just really well balanced. And I don't know, it's exciting to sing the early music in an intimate church setting. I really love that.
Yeah, totally. Especially, you know, as you say, those spaces can be so resonant.
Yeah.
And just filling it up, and that reverb can last for, you know, 8, 10, 12 seconds, depending on where you are.
Your listeners may be familiar with Hildegard von Bingen. She's the one who really set us going, and that was the chant drama,
the Ordo Virtutum, by Hildegard von Bingen.
And that's what really got us going.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I do want to say, for those in the audience, this is an interactive event, even though our 2 screens are pinned here on the main view for you. If you've got any questions at any point, we have a spotter who will see you. Wave your hand if you've got anything that pops into mind. We don't want this to be us dispensing anything from on high. This is an interactive event. So this program references, of course, this incredible text, this book, which talks about a time that I think is unfamiliar to a lot of us in modern day life, a time when Christians and Arabs and Jewish individuals all lived in this symbiotic harmony, in which there wasn't a lot of strife among these groups, and the music reflects that. So can you just start by sharing how you put this program together? You've got different sections for the different styles of music in this particular region of Spain, but just the idea for how you constructed this program.
I'll let you answer that.
Well, it was kind of, it was just like doing this research of following the threads, starting out from Andalusia, which is the area we're talking about in southern Spain, back in the 10th century, and well, actually back in the 8th century, and just following with the research what actually did probably the Arabic influence, what it influenced. And so we come to the troubadours in southern France, and troubadours all over the region, in Portugal and in Italy, and then we get to the Cantigas de Amigo, which are also in Galician Portuguese language, which was another. Occitan was the language of the troubadours, and this Galician Portuguese was the language of the literary language of the Portugal area, and they all show in their poetry, in their musical forms, but mostly in the poetry, the influence from the Arabic Andalusia. And then we go on, and the Sephardic material has to do with the when the Reconquista happens and the Christians start to take over in southern Spain again, and finally the Jewish population gets kicked out altogether, the Sephardic Jews take their Andalusian songs and they just take them with them, in order to remember their time in southern Spain, which was a flowering of Hebrew poetry. And then, then we went to the final, the reconquest of down there and bringing the Latin back, the Christian influence back, which has already been influenced by the Arabic in the meantime, because they're all commingling.
Yeah, it occurs to me a couple of things as I'm hearing you describe this program and the music on it. It occurs to me that this music, some of it must have been written down, some of it must not have been written down. How do you find what to sing, if that question makes sense? And how do you is it spending a bunch of time in libraries, or archives and finding old manuscripts, or this stuff is from the 800s and 900s? Where does the music come from, I guess, is the question.
Well, I have to say that when we started doing these programs, there wasn't a whole lot available besides going to the library.
Yeah.
And we weren't going into original manuscripts. That had already been done.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going into collections in libraries. Still a very tedious thing, but we're not musicologists. And then, down the line, you start being able to access some of this stuff via the internet, via other people's, having accessed it first. And it has become a whole lot easier for people to find this material. I just, looking to update the program notes, I found so much more material out there than was there even in 2009.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So does that change the way that you approach performing it? New information?
I don't know that that's the case.
I think more what changed the way we, maybe the instruments that we're using this time, the people that we're playing with, that probably influences more.
Yeah.
Well, this time, the first time in 2009, we had a more Sephardic clarinetist to play with us at the time. One of the Turkish, but wasn't Sephardic. Okay, well, Turkish. But this time we were really using the Arabic instruments, the oud, which we had before too, which is the precursor to the lute. And he has also then brought in instrumentalists that he's worked with before, a violinist and a percussionist. And both of the percussionist studied in Lebanon and is a specialist in the one instrument. It's just amazing. He spent years learning everything about this one instrument called the Rik, R-I-K. It's like a tambourine actually, but the way he plays it, it's very spectacular. And so, but it's different this time around. We're having different instrumentalists, so they're bringing something completely different to it. And so the rhythms are maybe a little bit different. The choice of ornamentation that they're bringing to it also influences how perhaps we perform. So that's always interesting, to have the added, mix of instruments.
Which actually brings up the whole point of improvisation and ornamentation and all that, and just accompaniment, because mostly that stuff isn't written down. And if there is all of this music wasn't even extant. For instance, the song that we're doing, I've got to find. I think it's Deus. One of the songs that we're doing on the program is a song that had no melody extant with it. And so the performers, the ensemble Alcatraz in San Francisco, actually put a different melody to it, a Catalan melody. And that's a process called contrafactum, taking a melody, a different melody, and putting it on. And so that has happened in certain instances.
Where you just have the text, but no
text. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and actually, even in the songs, the Cantigas de Amigo that we're doing, all of the three that we're doing is from one composer, Martin Kodaks, who wrote these 7 songs, and we have the 6 melodies that are still extant are the only melodies of Cantigas de Amigo that are out there.
Wow.
And we're doing 3 of them.
Wow.
But even though we have the melodies, we don't know how they were really accompanied.
Sure.
You know, so.
And about the style of singing as well. Like, so you have the melodies, but what do we know about how they would have been sung in that time period? And, you know, here we are hundreds of years later, you know, you're doing your own interpretation, right?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. People argue, you know, this is the kind of thing that people argue about, and they're saying, oh, the early music people are, you know, they're not really doing these things authentically. And then the early music people are saying, you know, oh, these people over here aren't doing it authentically. But what is authentically? And
right.
So what we're trying to do here, because we have these new instrumentalists that we're working with, is we're kind of taking ideas, again, what Samela said, you know, their ideas for ornamentation and stuff, and you know, trying to incorporate the same kind of back and forth that was probably happening back then. But
right.
They sound like, you know, were they nasal? Were they, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Did they use vibrato? We don't know. How do we know? But we do know, well, many of the troubadours were educated musicians, and many were educated as clerics, and probably had vocal training, whatever that would be back then in the medieval time. But if they did that as full-time work, they probably had a pretty good chops after a while. So yeah, but we don't really know what the sound would be. We do what we hope, what sounds good to us.
Yeah, I would think.
And we figured the human voice hasn't changed too much.
There you go. There you go. I would think all of those conversations about performance practice and, you know, historically informed, whatever, would get a bit tedious after a while. Like, is there a right and a wrong way to be an interpreter?
Right.
Ryan, I did see a hand shoot up from George Brumder. You're going to have to unmute yours. There you go.
Right. Yes. Well, this is certainly very interesting. I just wondered if we could, if this question is not welcome, we can skip it. But I'm sort of wondering what this program even is that we're doing. What is this thing that's going to be, what's the concept actually about? And how did the book come into this picture? The book, I think, is one of the most amazing things I've ever read. I'm only about halfway through it, and I probably won't really finish the whole thing after this program is over. But it is so elaborate, so complicated, so detailed, with so much nuance and atmosphere all over the place. I just can't imagine where it came from. That's a comment, actually, not a question. But Brian, you made some comment about this being an era of peace or something like that. And I don't actually think that's quite true. From what I'm reading in the book, there's all sorts of political violence, but it's not religious based, usually. The 3 religions seem to exist in pretty much harmony, but the times are pretty turbulent. Anyway, that's just a comment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, George, actually, because you're right. I shouldn't characterize it as peace and harmony and rainbows and unicorns and puppies and everything. But I think you're hitting on exactly the correct way of characterizing this, is where so much strife among various religious backgrounds is what our sort of default is. And here was a time and here was a place where that didn't happen. And so that's, I would say, and I'll let Susan and Samela speak to this as well, but I would say that's kind of what this concert is about, is showcasing the music that arose from that moment where Christians, Jews, Muslims didn't want to destroy one another, and we're open to the ideas of each other. Does that sort of jive with you, Susan and Samela?
From what I understand, yes, but you know, as what George was talking about, you know, there definitely was strife. From what I've read, there's definitely was strife going on, but in this particular time, just this very particular small amount of time, in Cordoba, I mean, centered in Cordoba, the caliph there appreciated the cultural output of the people who lived there already. And it wasn't that people were just allowed to be, they were still second-class citizens. I mean, they were still conquered peoples, but their culture wasn't suppressed, which happens so often with conquered peoples. They, for instance, the intellectual Jews were often in high places in the government, were allowed to be in high places in the government. The famous poet Ibn Hazm was in government, the Arabic poet, for instance. And the Christians and the Muslims had been, you know, back and forth politically and in religious. But I mean, at this particular time, they were allowed to exist and their culture was allowed to exist. So that's what made it special.
Yeah, Stephen, would you?
I was just going to add that
yeah.
George's original question is, well, what is this program?
Yeah.
And the program is in 6 sections. It's a through line. I mean, you go right through the program. We're not stopping or anything like that. But in these 6 sections, you, even with our amateur ears, will hear Arabic influence in some of the sections. We'll hear Sephardic influence in some of the sections. And the program notes will certainly point that out. And you will hear these things that are clearly rooted in the liturgy or the idioms of these 3 disparate religions. And there's little sections. And that's the book was just an inspiration to try to capture the sounds that emanated from the various disparate religious practices. Is that fair enough?
Yes.
Thank you, Stephen. You're so articulate.
Thank you, Stephen.
I was thinking maybe we should send the program to everyone, so we can. It's easier to comprehend when you can see it in front of you too, as well. But that's a great question, George, and thank you for it. Maybe Susan and Samela, you can talk a little bit about what Stephen is mentioning here. Also, you know, so we're going to be able to hear the various influences, like. And maybe it's hard to put words to what the music sounds like, but like what does a Sephardic influence sound like? What does Arabic influence sound like in the music? Is that something that is a question that is answerable with words, or would you need, or I do not want to put you on the spot, but if you know, could demonstrate a sound, you know, that, oh, this is what Sephardic music would sound like, and this is the Arabic influence, this is the Christian influence. But again, I don't want to put you on the spot. I know you're not warmed up.
That might be a bit difficult, but
yeah.
I just want to say, so I mean, the program starts with the early Christians, so that will be recognizable, maybe more of a chant-like singing more, it might be sung by nuns even perhaps, and sung in the early language, the Mozarabic, is that how you pronounce that? I think it's kind of comes from the very early Christian Latin mixture, right? A Christian is not a language.
The language is Latin. The language is Latin, but the chant actually comes from the Mozarabic Spaniards, who are the Jewish. I'm sorry, the Christian that were in Andalusia.
So the sound there at the opening will be more like very recognizable to people, and then we're introducing then the Arabic roots, which would we'll have the instrumentation. You'll hear them play a piece of their own. Two of the guys are from Serbia originally, I think. Oh, I've kind of forgotten where they're from.
One is from Egypt and one is
Syria.
Oh, did I lose audio, or was that just me?
Sorry, I think I guess I pressed something. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're back.
You can hear us now. Okay.
Yes.
Syria. Okay, and then you'll hear. Yeah, I don't know whether we can demonstrate what you're asking for right now.
It's so hard. It's so hard to use words to talk about music, but what you're saying is, as we go through the program, and as you're also seeing it on the paper,
see on the page the categories.
Yeah.
The early Christian music, then Arabic roots is our second section. Third section is the troubadours, which is more the educated musicians writing music and putting it down on paper, definitely for courtly singing or about courtly love. So it might be, imagine, beautifully dressed people who are engaged to sing at the court for whoever the ruler there is in that region, and perhaps carrying an instrument. And later they became more real performers, might even I read some acrobatics, but I don't think we'll be showing anything like that. And then going on to the Galician, which is more those are secular songs, and then onto the Sephardic, and ending with the pushing out of the Jews and more of the Christian music.
The Christian, excuse me, the
Christian
question. Pilgrimage music.
The pilgrimage.
Could I just continue with that for a second? It's not going to be just in the sound. The influence wasn't just the musical aspect of it. It's the poetry.
Sure.
The Arabic poetry, because I haven't discussed that yet, was one of the huge influences. The Arabs brought their classical language and their poetry to Andalusia, and very quickly everybody started speaking Arabic. All the intellectual class started speaking Arabic because that was the lingua franca at that point. And I mean, I've read places where, the Christians were very upset because everybody was learning Arabic, and they were starting to write their poetry in, Arabic, and using the Arabic forms, poetic forms. And that's one of the big influences of what happened, that got taken north to the troubadours. That even maybe more so than the actual music. And but then, with the Sephardic, there's this one, has kind of a melody like da 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 da, that kind of thing, which is Arabic sounding, that mode, that kind of mode,
right? The modality.
And and that's a Sephardic song. So yeah,
so it's all encompassing. Yeah. And that does bring up a question about languages that I did want to get to, but Melissa, you said we have
I saw Lori, you raised your hand.
I was going to ask if there were different modes or scales among these different traditions, and we'd hear accidentals introduced at some time or something like that.
You definitely will.
Are there names for those different modes and scales?
Well, actually, this one, let me look at my program notes. It's the Sephardic if I can find it. It's like, it's definitely a Hebrew word for the mode, which is not in my brain right now, but it's in the printed, it's in the printed, and so for this, the one I was just kind of going, it's definitely a Hebrew mode, which was influenced by the Arabic modes. So the Jewish population in Andalusia and the Christian population had a whole song tradition before the Arabs arrived. And so their tradition influenced the Arabic as well as the Arabic influenced theirs. Yeah.
We have another question from Elaine Kramer.
Yeah, I'm unmuting. I tried to write it on the chat room. I didn't know if the chat room was closed. So actually two things. One is the relationship to what you're singing in the original Sephardic Jews, and Ladino. That is, I had at one point in the temple I was in, had a cantor who was from Argentina and would be singing some songs in Ladino, and I am Ashkenazi. This is different backgrounds of Jews and different kinds of music. So I'm curious about that. And the second is, there is an early music musician whose name I cannot remember right now, which isn't surprising, who does a lot of original Arabic music and talks about the modes. And you're mentioning a number of instruments, and with this, I mean, I don't know, there's no visuals, so I don't have pictures and stuff, but I would love to at least have somebody write in the chat room how they're spelled, because I can't really understand that. So I can take a look at the pictures. I play early music instruments, and I'm very interested in the origins of these different instruments, which have relationships to each other. So that's two actually separate things. Thank you.
Well, I guess she's going to put.
Melissa's on the chat with the instruments and the spellings.
The spelling's all over the place is the problem. So
that's true, because it's transliteration of
the
different
Rick
alphabet.
is
Yeah.
R-I-K, R-I-Q-Q, R-I-Q, you know.
Yeah.
And her first question.
Talking about Ladino, the language, is that one of the languages that you sing in, or
yes.
how does?
It's a kind of a Spanish. Yeah.
Yeah, and that language is represented on this program. Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit more about the different languages that you will sing in. First of all, like how many different languages? How do you study the languages? How do you learn pronunciation? All of that good.
Well, it is always a bit of a struggle. You know, I don't know that anybody actually converses in these medieval languages, so that gives us a little comfort that we can maybe make some mistakes. But what do you want to show? Oh, well, do you want to know what the languages are? That's
yes. I want to know what and how.
So, well, Latin, of course, is
sure.
simple because that's sung all the time and still. And then the Arabic, we have asked for help with our musicians. We really only sing one piece that I can remember that is more Arabic pronunciation. And fortunately, it's very repetitive poem, so wasn't verses and verses, thankfully, because that's. But it's really fun to sing. And then the Provençal is really the prominent language of the medieval troubadours, and that's the medieval version of Occitan, which is now still trying to stay alive now in Occitan, and which is a kind of a mixture, well, even in the medieval times, of the French and Latin and I'm drawing a blank, but anyway, it was kind of a mixture. And the Galician Portuguese, we had someone here help coach us on that. But you know, we've listened to recordings of people who have recorded some of this music who actually still live in that country. So that helps because we figure they're more informed. And, you know, we're all California women and do our best. That's how it works. What else am I missing?
The Judeo-Spanish.
Yeah, the Ladino. And, but I don't know that
So we've just had coaching and
yeah.
Actually, some of our coaching, you may know Peter Rutenberg.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I thought you might.
Yes.
But he's helped us a lot with the language, but we had done research before for the language.
For those who don't know, Peter Rutenberg is a choral icon in Southern California. Capella chamber singers for many years, and just is a really wonderful resource for all things singing in Southern California.
Does your vocal technique differ from period to period?
That's a great question.
Not necessarily, except when we sing chant, we do try to hold our vibrato as much as possible, not to interfere, so we can blend very well as best we can. We have a new singer for this concert because we lost our original member, Kristen Herman, our dear friend. So this is fun new sound for Voxfire with our new colleague Hillary for this concert, Hillary Fraser Thompson, local singer. And so it's interesting. This has been fun starting something fresh. But our technique, no, I think for the rest of it, no, our voices are suited to this time period. So it's not too difficult for us. In other words, we're not, even though I sang in the opera chorus for over 30 years, I wouldn't say I'm an opera singer. So that is more difficult. I have many colleagues that worked with me at the opera that would not be able to do this style of music. They just physically cannot do it. I mean, it would sound too, it's got too much vibrato. Some people cannot hold their vibrato, and it would interfere with what we believe might be appropriate for this time period.
Interesting.
A question from here.
Yes.
When you say the music was written, how in fact was it written at this time? Would we recognize the various symbols and so forth of?
Oh, that's a good question.
I love that question. Thanks, John.
That is a great question.
Do you have any of the original ones?
No, I don't. But musical notation was not really standardized into what we know until quite late, the 16th century.
Yes.
Something like that. So, you know, the chants, the Latin chants were all in neumes, kind of interesting little shapes and forms, meaning, you know, kind of where you went in the mode. And that's true of a lot of this early stuff.
How precise is that notation? Sorry, just curious about how precise is that notation? So you see this shape kind of going somewhere, but then you've also got to know, I guess, what mode you're supposed to be in, right? And that helps to read the score. Well,
again, going back to musicologists and people who have, you know, researched and studied all this stuff so much, with the Latin chant, it was standardized at a certain point, these neumes. So pretty much, yes, you do know where they go with the Latin. If you're using the you know, the standard, I'm trying to think of the name of it. I can't think of it right now.
The Liber Vermel?
Well, like in the the Liber Usualis.
Usualis.
The Liber Usualis, the Catholic chants. But that's the Latin.
So, but the scores that we're working off of, obviously, she's put them into, you know, readable modern notation.
Sure.
And in 2009, I'm not sure what you were drawing from when you first made our scores.
Yeah.
That we can read. Do you remember where you got what they looked like?
I'll have to go back, but I mean, I wasn't reading any, I was not reading any original.
Yeah.
So there's no absolute frequency.
Oh, right.
Or clef.
No, none of, no, that was never
Oh.
that was also never standardized until much later. And I think most likely, you know, people were singing these songs. If they were accompanied, they were singing the songs with a pitch that would work with the instruments that they were being accompanied by.
And would a traditional scale be recognized?
Would a traditional scale be recognized?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes, well, it depends on the mode. And the Greek, you know, the Arabic modes actually came from what I understand, Greek and Persian and, you know, the much earlier civilization modes. And one of those Greek modes is the Mixolydian mode, which is basically a G major scale without the raised 7, I think. So yeah, that there's a mode you'd recognize. So
Elaine, I see Elaine is raising her hand.
Well, since I play early music, there are a number of musicians, and those are musicologists, scholars that Susan is referring to. 2 of them I know really well because they're at USC. And there is a group of musicians now interested in studying the early modes. And the relationship, John, is different in the early modes from what we understand. And I always think of Bach, but what we understand is the modern musical scales and music theory. So the original modes, and this goes back to medieval times, the original modes have different scales, and they don't have accents. They don't have sharps or flats in them. And if you hear them, they sound very, even if they're European and not part of something that would be considered Arabic, they sound like the Sephardic or Arab music because of the way they're structured. And it's my understanding, but I'm not a musicologist, that a lot of this originated with the Greek and then with the church, where they were the first to actually figure out how to write a manuscript. So what early musicians do, and I don't know if these are Arab scholars now or scholars that specialize, Susan and Samela, in your music, there are original manuscripts, excuse me, that go back a long, long time ago that they now can look at and take that. And I don't read the music like Susan is talking about. So they translate it, if you will, into a modern scale. So you can sing it and play it, then you don't have to read the original.
oh, yeah.
But there are original manuscripts that took the oral traditions, which originally started with the Catholic Church, which is very fascinating because these were monks that were doing this and started writing this down. And I guess during that period in Spain, there were people that were also writing it down. So that's what the original musicologists and those who specialize in early music, and I refer to some friends of mine at USC, they will, in a workshop, put up what the original manuscript looks like. And there are different scales. They are not the same modern scales like a C scale or a G scale or, you know, B flat scale that we know. So that's my knowledge, and it's very limited.
All of that's true.
I don't know, Susan, if that's accurate, if you understand.
Yeah, that's
accurate, but that's pretty much what I know.
Yes.
That's, yeah,
Is that Adam Gilbert that you're referencing at USC, or?
yeah, Adam.
Yeah.
Yes, I know the Gilberts really well. Rotem is actually my music teacher. And
Okay.
Adam Gilbert is a scholar, but his specialty is in European early music and has a lot of theories. And so he and several other people that are coming out of USC do a lot of research on these manuscripts, but the music that Susan and Samela is doing is actually different. This Arab Sephardic thing is different than if you were doing a medieval or Renaissance piece out of France or wherever.
Yep, totally. And this is the thing. Sorry, go ahead, Susan.
I was just going to say, the Arabic modes actually developed more. They were called their system is called Maqam, and it incorporates a lot of microtones, quarter tones. So, and that's because it's a very melodically based style. And because of the instruments they had, they were able to do that. They were unfretted, no frets.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't they didn't have to stay on specific pitches. They could slide around,
bend them.
Yeah,
bend the tones.
And then when the lute comes along, it's fretted. And so when the oud gets introduced to Western Europe, and then it gets overtaken by the lute, which was based on the oud, but with frets, then the pitches start to become more the quarter tones start to go away.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, this whole conversation of there's a whole group of people who have devoted their lives to studying this music and telling us, information about how it was performed to inform what you do, which is interpretive of music from all these centuries ago. And it's just this wonderful, like, symbiotic relationship of, the researchers doing their thing, performers doing their thing, and bringing these worlds together. And also just the vastness of all of this. There's so much music out there. And, for those of us who kind of live in this like classical music world, like we need to remind ourselves, it does not begin in the 1700s. Like, it begins 1,000 years before that, basically. I did want to say, as we wrap up, thank you so much for participating, Susan and Samela and everyone here on this lovely Zoom call in this time of pandemic that still isn't done. And I do want to say that Melissa has put in the chat, there's a documentary based on the book, The Ornament of the World, and she's linked to that in the chat. You do have to be a PBS member to watch it, but as a public radio guy, it's worth it, I promise. But just as we wrap up, Susan and Samela, thinking about kind of the overarching concept of this program, of the music that's involved, of this time period, John Lennon thought, imagine all the world living life in peace with no religion. And here was a moment where, okay, it wasn't peace necessarily all the time, but openness to other ideas, openness to different sounds, openness to different thoughts, openness to different ways of experiencing the world. Where does music fit in for all of us in our own lives? Like, can music make us more open to different cultures and different ideas?
As Shakespeare said, music is the food of love. And that's been my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think, of course, music can, because it's the universal language, but I also think that the more we keep educating ourselves on different peoples and the history, and somehow if we learn more about some other culture and hear their music, and that we can, I don't know, I'm just trying to think, it's part of the whole education system. And I feel like in schools, I did a lot of performing in schools with early music, and I loved it because it was through the music center, and they brought in so much music from different cultures to these schools. And I just think, I hope that that just keeps up, and that helps it. You know, I remember the first time I ever heard, you know, music from India. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The tabla and all of that. And I thought, I mean, you know, if you don't ever hear it, if you don't, and just, it was so exciting to me. I mean, I was just thrilled. And I thought, that's what I want to do. You know, I didn't do it, but we have to bring these to our students constantly, and just don't let them die, and teach people about different cultures and their history. When we're looking at this program and we're reading, I mean, I haven't done as much as I want to. That book that we're basing this idea on is very dense with ideas, extremely dense, and but it's exciting. Though I can't believe that culture back there. There was just a flourishing of arts and the love of the word, the written word, the books, and to look back on that. I think I'm getting off topic here, but I wanted to say how exciting it is to learn about that, and how I want to dive deeper and realize how did they how did they do that? And I mean, it's so sad that it went away. It's kind of interesting to think what would have happened if maybe the Christians hadn't been able to take over. And because it was an enormous flourishing of arts at the time that this program we're trying to elevate with these pieces. I think I got off topic there because I don't know exactly how to bring it to everybody, but I'm deep into the education.
I think we have a great. I know we're running out of time. I think we have a really great opportunity now. We were talking about that before, of bringing people together by with the internet itself. It has caused an opportunity for people to come together, get to hear things they wouldn't get to hear otherwise.
Yeah. That's very beautifully said, each of you. And I want to thank you for your time today, and for the great conversation, and can't wait for this program to hear all of the different music and words and poetry and everything that's involved. So want to toss it back to Stephen and Melissa at PCM to wrap things up. But thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Susan and Samela. This was such an interesting conversation, and I know that many of our guests here will actually be in attendance on Saturday. So I hope that this was a really kind of rich conversation that adds to your experience, and we really look forward to seeing you. If you're not coming on Saturday, there are still tickets available. You can go to our website and get them there. But thank you again so much, and I guess we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.